In this video, I'll show you how to build a fully automated invoice processing portal using Softr new AI agents and workflow features. Vendors will be able to upload invoices directly to your portal, and Softr AI Agent will automatically extract key information like invoice number, total, and due date. Then, with the new Softr Workflows, we will parse the data to create line items, update email status, and send email notifications so that entire invoice review process runs automatically. Let's get started. Hi, this is Greg from Business Automated. On this channel, we are helping you to automate your business workflows. If you are new here, consider subscribing to get the latest updates on the latest tools, or even joining our channel to get a wide range of membership-only perks. In this video, I'll show you how you can automate your process by using an automated invoice portal built on Softr. I will also introduce you to two new features, which are AI Agent inside of Softr Databases and Softr Workflows, which is a neat replacement for Make and Zapier inside of Softr. First, let's start with overview of our portal. So inside of the portal, here you can see that I'm previewing this as a vendor. We have vendor users and we also have internal users that will be reviewing the invoices. As a vendor, I have a view for my dashboard, and I also have a view for the invoices that I have submitted so far. And you can see that here I'm the Blue Ocean Logistics, and you can see those invoices have been already paid. What I need to do here as a vendor, I need to add a new invoice, and the only thing that I'm doing here is adding my invoice over here. I click add, and then the process at the backend automatically parses and processes this invoice. So you can see here inside of the Softr database, right now I had a new PDF file added. So you can see that the new row is being here created. You can see that this is already linked to the correct vendor. And you can see that the whole row got populated with the information about the invoice. So now when I go back to the studio, I will change the user for the internal user. And here on the list of invoices, you can see that I have all the invoices from all the different vendors, and the invoice from Blue Logistics have been added at the very bottom as parsed. So you can see here, I would see all the invoices that have been submitted. Maybe some of them might have parsing errors. Here you would see the invoice that was basically most recently parsed. So when I open this invoice, you can see that I already have them. Invoice due date, I have the currency of the invoice, and I also have the line items over here. So what I can do is I can open this invoice to basically check what is the name of the company, what is the details on the invoice. There are two line items. That is correct. The total of the invoice is also correct. So yeah, so if everything would be working okay, in this case, I can mark it as approved for other people to process this, or here I can directly mark it as paid and then click update. On the vendor side, this invoice will already be marked as paid. And at the same time, I have already received a notification from the company that my invoice has been paid. So dear Blue Ocean Logistics, your invoice with this specific value has been paid and you will receive the funds within a certain number of days. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the process and let's show you how this is happening here using Softr AI and also using Softr Workflows. Let's start first with the submitting of new files and Softr AI. You can see that for this project, I'm using Softr Databases, which function very similar to Airtable. So if you're familiar with Airtable, you have an idea how this operates over here. So what we have set up over here is that for every new row that gets added, and new row gets added when we submit a new invoice from a vendor, for every new added row, we run an AI agent. AI agent is a special field which has a prompt and a specific description, a specific model to do an action based on your prompt and based on the content of other fields within this record. So when you look at my prompt, let's quickly go through what is specified here inside of the prompt. So you can see that I'm giving it a system instruction that you are a model that parses data to retrieve a JSON object, and I'll tell you why this is important. I'm adding here a file. So Softr gives us ability to add directly file. We can also attach other information from this specific row, but in our use case, we only get the PDF. So first, when the invoice is submitted, we only get this file.
And what we need to get from it, we need to get specific information. And this is example that we give to AI, what kind of information we retrieve. So we want to have the invoice number, invoice date, due date. We want to have currency, and we also want to have line items. And we give a specific example of how the line items would look like. And we give also another example in a slightly different format. And once again, we reminded to return a JSON. I'm using XML tags just to make it a little bit more clear for AI what are the pieces of this information that I have provided. Here I also have a certain set of rules to help it understand like the date formats and how to handle currencies and the dates and so on, and what to do with when some of the information is missing. Now we could trigger this field manually, but here we basically have selected an autofill for this field. So whenever this field changes, and you can see that here we can define what are the triggers for this field to run. So that gives us quite a good control in terms of what is happening. So in our case, every time this file would change, we would rerun this automation one more time. We could also have a button that if we trigger this button, we would rerun this automation if we would like to change the prompt or rerun the automation for any reason, and so on. Now, what we will get from here, you can see the preview over here. So this is the result we'll get from this field. So you will see we receive a JSON, which might not be that useful in the first step, but the reason I'm asking it for a JSON format, so that we can use one single AI extraction to get all the information that we need for all the additional fields, including the line items, because for every invoice, we would like to have specific line items. So you will notice here that initially, once we get this information, nothing else would be filled. We would only get this specific field. And this is the moment when the Softr Workflows come into place. This is a brand new feature that Softr has just launched. And if you are familiar with Zapier or with Make, this will look very similar to you. So we start with like an initial trigger. And once we get the initial trigger, we kind of continue and we can add steps and branches to execute different actions. And if we go from the beginning, this is very similar to how this would be set up in Zapier. Actually, I would say this is even more friendly than Zapier and easier to use in this workflow, and works definitely faster. But let's look at the initial step over here. So we would have a trigger. And you can see that what we can use for a trigger, we can use Airtable for a trigger. And if we take Airtable, we can check for specific records being added. We can use Gmail, we can use Google Sheets. But in our case, I'll be using, we can also use webhooks and we can also schedule this. But in our case, I'm using thing that is super useful, which is not the records added, but when a record meets conditions. And in this specific case, I had set status of the processing to be completed. So you can see this is very familiar. If you have been using Airtable, you select the property and then you add value. And if that condition is met, then the workflow runs over here. And you can see that in this specific case, the processing status is a formula that checks whether there is any value inside of the extraction. If there is nothing in the record, if there is no value here, then this field is empty. Once there is something added, this field will be populated. So let's test it with another invoice over here. We have added new row. And here you can see that the AI field is running. So the moment the extraction finishes, the formula status will change and this will trigger this workflow. And what this workflow does, it basically takes the JSON. Here we are using a very simple piece of code to take the extracted data and parse it using this simple JavaScript model, which is also fantastic because this gives us a lot of flexibility. In this case, we just want to parse the line items for that specific record. Now, here what we have conditions which are if it works and if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we update the record with error parsing. If it works, we continue with this branch over here. And what we do over here, so we run an update, so you can see we can add additional fields. So we can, for example, select status, currency, we can select notes. And once we select this, we can set any value that would be coming from the previous step. So this is quite familiar with Zapier or even Airtable automation. So it's It's a very familiar interface. We can select what value we would add over here. We can also do a test over here, so we can see what was the output from the previous steps and see what would be the values visible here. And what we do here, we use a bulk action step to iterate over what was returned from the custom code over here. And through that, we create individual records. So when we go back over here, you can see that the status has been completed, and we also have individual line items added to that step. So even if I'm a vendor here, I can open this record and I will see all the details from the invoice that have been recognized together with the status. Softr Workflows gives us also an ability to check the history of what was executed. So you can see that this is the run that has been executed, and we can investigate what exactly has happened. So which steps have run successfully, which steps have failed. So we can see at every step what was the output, what were the values, what records we have created, and this is fantastic for debugging. Now going back to the invoices, you will notice that if I change to an internal employee, so you can see here, Susie, it's an internal user, says internal group. As the internal user, I have permissions to add new items and basically edit what's there. Everything is correct, so the values are the same. If for whatever reason there will be some error or maybe the format is different, we always have this opportunity to add a new item or to do some edits. But in most cases, if these are standard formats, you can see that it's working pretty well. So the moment when we change the status over here to paid, we trigger another workflow. Here, similar, we are also using a status-based trigger. When status equals paid, then first we find the vendor name so that we can find the email of that vendor. And in the Gmail module here, we take the results of the module before and we input some of the templated language over here. So we put the vendor name, we put the invoice ID and amount, and some message to the vendor. So whenever we pay the invoice, we get an email sent out to the vendor to let them know that they'll be paid shortly. So to wrap it up, over last month, Softr has released a lot of features, one of them being the database. And right now, on top of this database, having AI agents inside of it, being able to run different AI functionality that opens room for a lot of interesting use cases. So for example, invoice parsing, document parsing, creating automated email responses, and so on. And together with the AI agent capability, on top of that, having workflows that we can set up and trigger directly in Softr allows you to create a very advanced business logic. And not only inside of Softr by updating the records, but also reaching out to external software and external APIs. The list here is not so big, but you also have ability to call external APIs, which means you can pretty much connect to any other software that exists on the internet. With all that, right now, you can build some really advanced business functionality using purely Softr for everything from the front end to the back end. So I think this is quite exciting development. And yeah, let me know what things you guys would like to build and what kind of business use cases you would like to see automated. And yeah, that's it. Have a fantastic day.